This is a speedboard from 20 years ago, and this is a modern speedboard. But here's the thing, both are built to do one thing, go as fast as possible. So what's actually changed in 2 decades of speedboard design? Let's put it to the test in this video.
So here we have the two boards. On this side we have the 20-year-old speedboard. It's a Tomen SR50. It's 50 centimeters wide, which the name already suggests. It's quite a bit longer than the modern board. It's 239 centimeters long, whereas this one is only 227.5 centimeters long. So around 11.5 centimeters longer. This board has 60 liters, whereas this one only has 54 liters. So volume-wise, they're not so far apart actually. The weight and construction, I would say this one is about 1 kilogram heavier than the modern board. So we can see already a little difference here. The biggest difference between the two boards is actually the bottom shape. And you can already see it. The tail on this one looks much different from the tail on this modern speedboard. On the old board, what we can see that in the front we actually even have somewhat of a monoconcave, meaning that the water will get kind of onto a channel below the board. Then from there, more towards the middle of the board, it goes into a super deep double concave. And towards the back, if we check the shape, the board has a very pronounced V. And on top of that, even here, very deep double concave. And then this crazy looking tail. So you can kind of imagine with the monoconcave in the front of the board, the water will get channeled, then onto both sides with a deep double concave, and then released here on these nice looking cutouts. I mean, the cutouts here look really nice with the carbon shining through. I think it's a really cool looking board. So that's a big difference to how 99% of boards are made today. Like this Futurefly speedboard has kind of a double concave more towards the front and then goes into a V towards the back, but only a very slight V to kind of release the water to both sides. So in theory, these boards should ride very different. And then, yeah, you have this kind of super narrow tail here in the back. Look at my hand, it's like maybe 7, 8, 9 centimeters. Actually, let me get something to measure the board. And if we check the front of the fin box here, the tail is only 11 centimeters wide. Towards the back of the fin box, it's 8 centimeters. Here on the back of the fin box, it's 16 centimeters. So 16 compared to 8. The board is half as wide on the back. But then what we also have to take into account, if I flip the boards around, the foot strap position is vastly different on this old speedboard compared to the new speedboard. Here, look at where the front screw is. It's behind the back of the back foot strap. Whereas on this one, the front screw is kind of in between the back foot strap. So I think because of this super narrow tail, we cannot place the foot strap right here, because then we would just not have enough surface below the foot strap, put too much pressure onto the fin and get into a spin out. So I think because of this tail, the foot strap has to be further forward. So while this board is at the widest point 50 centimeters wide, and this one is at the widest point only 44.5 centimeters wide, this one has the much more narrow tail. And when you're really on the speed run, you're only flying anyway on the very tail end of the board, and then all the width in front really shouldn't matter. So this board should get pretty fast. Okay guys, so let's drive over to La Palme in south of France, which is probably the best and most consistent speed windsurf spot in Europe, and give the boards a proper test over there.
La Palme is one of the fastest spots out there because it has a very wide, long sand beach, so there's no obstructions for the wind, and the wind is coming regularly with over 30 knots from an offshore direction, making it perfect flat water and the perfect place to test out these boards. First time I went with the old Tomen. The wind was still pretty light, but getting up and blading on this board was actually relatively easy, which really surprised me. The narrow tail didn't really affect the light wind performance at all. And even going back upwind in this light wind, I was going pretty good. I did, however, struggle with finding my foot positioning on the board. From the get-go, I had the feeling that my feet were too far inward on the board, so I couldn't really put pressure on the fin and rail the board to get it really free and fast. I adjusted the foot strap positioning a couple of times and it got better and better, but still I wasn't really happy with the foot placement on the board. I think this is really something that newer boards excel at. Board designers have placed a lot of focus on the deck shape in recent years, and fins have also gotten a lot better. So now you can put full pressure onto the fin and load them up and they will not spin out. whereas when you do this with an older board and a less good fin, they tend to spin out more easily. I think the positioning of the back foot on this board being so far forward is also kind of tribute to that. Anyway, the first few runs were actually really light.
Well, the board is certainly going. It's still super light wind. I did 2 runs. The first one was 32 knots. The second one was, let's see, 28 knots. So super slow. Wind is like 15 knots at the moment. But the board is going. I had to put the foot straps a bit tighter because they were super wide. And maybe I'm gonna have to put the mast foot a bit back to get the board to ride a bit more free, because I can feel with the back foot strap being so far forward that it's riding a little bit weird. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting how all the shapes kind of work. We're gonna try it later on when the wind is picking up, because it's still super early and the wind is just supposed to go up throughout the day. So I think the board feels a bit sticky, and if you look, I have the mast base position very much forward because I was kind of calculating it on the foot strap position. But since the foot strap position is so far forward, I think I need to go back a little bit with the mast space to get the board more free. So I'm gonna put it like 2-3 centimeters further back and just try this. Guys, quick advertisement, because I want to tell you about the speed clinic held by the Patrick team that's happening next month in September on the 13th and 14th. I will also be there. Then we have Heidi, Vincent and Twan, 3 of the biggest names in speed. So if you want to learn more about speed surfing, I think this clinic is a great place to improve your skills on speed.
So while the wind kept increasing throughout the morning, I was working on the settings and the positions on the board. Because I was struggling a bit, like I just said, the foot strap position was not right, and then also the mast track position was way too far forward when I started. It was kind of hard to find like the right balance on this board, just because the geometry of this board with the tail going so far back or the back foot strap going so far forward was just so different to what I'm used to. It was not initially clear to me if I like where I needed to put all the mast track positions, the foot straps and so on. But as the wind increased, I felt more and more confident on the board, and I felt like I find better settings to get the board more onto the rail. I put the mast track back more than 3 centimeters in the end, and that really helped. And yeah, each run went faster and faster and faster. So I had 33 knots, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, and then I had like the really nice run where I reached my goal that I kind of set in my head of reaching 40 knots. And then, once I reached 40 knots, I really wanted to go onto the new Futurefly board. But something kind of interesting happened, because my dad was trying the whole time to get going on the small Fanatic Speedboard that has like 53, 54 liters and is 45 wide. But as you saw, the wind wasn't the strongest and he couldn't really get going on the Speedboard. So once I was finished on the Tommen board, my dad actually thought, okay, this one is a bit wider, has a bit more volume with 60 liters. So if I cannot going on the Fanatic, maybe I can get going on this one. So actually I gave the board to my dad and he tried it. And in fact, he really, really liked it and ended up just sailing the whole rest of the day on this board. And what's kind of surprising is that he broke his record on the 10-second run, and I think also on the 500 meters. So what he did was, I think, 41.37 on max speed, so he went even faster than me. And he did a 500 meter of almost 39 knots, which I think is also his personal best. And I think one thing we have to take into consideration that I'm going to touch on later again is that the day was super, super flat. There was no big chop. And we're going to get into that later. But now let's jump over to the Futurefly Speedboard from 2025 and see how this compares to the old ones. the modern Speedboard, I could immediately feel the difference. I could push fully on the fin when the gust hit and just keep accelerating. Maybe it's also worth mentioning that I put a modern asymmetric 21 cm fin in, whereas on the older board I used a good but a symmetric carbon fin that's roughly 15 years old, I would say. The deck shape on the modern Speedboard allowed me to feel really confident and locked in on the board. Therefore, the board would lift more, and on average I felt like I could ride on less wetted surface area. Starting and jibing was actually easier on the Tommen, as that one is wider and has a bit more volume. The speed comparison isn't really fair here. I did 44.95 knots max speed on the Futurefly board, whereas I only did 40.4 knots on the Tommen. But I had a lot more wind when I was riding the Futurefly board, which certainly helped here.
So in the end, what has actually changed on Speedboard design over the last 20 years? To be honest, I would say not that much. This board specifically is, I think, an outlier of all the boards, because this is a board that's really different and where someone tried something really different from all the others, which nowadays we don't see happening too often. Comparing the two boards in the end, I would say yes, there is some progression in the 20 years that the newer board is a bit better, especially because the translation of power to the fin and to get the board railing works a bit better with the deck shape, and the positioning of the back foot strap on the fin and all this stuff works a bit better. It's easier to rail the board, even in lighter wind, to go really fast. But I think it was also not a super fair comparison, because I kind of stopped going on the old Speedboard when the wind got really strong and didn't really give it a try then anymore. So I think I could have easily gotten 42, 43 knots also with the old board. So maybe it's worth to do a part 2 and test the board when we get really 40, 50 knots and see how it's doing then. But one thing I want to mention is that I actually talked with Pete Davis the evening after trying this board about the board, and he told me that back in the day a lot of people were using it and the board was really kind of struggling when the conditions were getting rough. People would crash more often than not and just out of nowhere basically spin out, crash, whatever. And yeah, I didn't really experience that because the conditions were super flat. And yeah, so that's a bit scary to hear this. Maybe I have to try it in big strong winds with chop and see for myself how this is doing, and if I can really feel the difference there between the newer and older boards. But guys, if you have any other boards that you would like me to test that have some crazy ideas like that one, leave a comment down below and I will try to get my hands on it, and maybe we can do something like a reoccurring series here on the channel where I'm going to test some old or strange board concepts. That would be really fun, I think. Also, if you're interested in the Futurefly boards, most boards are already sold out, but I still have a few in stock. So if you're interested in a brand new Futurefly board, write me a mail to contact@nils-bach.com and I can help you out there. And I would say that's it for the video. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like the video. See you next time.